In higher ed, we're all looking for big wins, but reducing a 75% application abandonment rate and achieving a 90% conversion rate, that's next level transformation. Michael Bettersworth, CMO at Texas State Technical College, shares how they achieved this by streamlining the application process with Element 451.
Our Element journey began out of a necessity. We were switching to a new SIS, and the application process was going to pose some real usability issues for us. We felt that application was going to hamper our enrollment. So we began quickly to evaluate different CRMs, different applications. So for context on that, our conversion rate with the prior application had about 75% abandonment of people clicking apply to submit. And the first weeks after going live with Element, we saw an 80% conversion, and that's now up to 90. So improving the usability of that application on the front-end process has had a significant advance in our intake.
When technology works for students, it works for you. Visit element451.com to see how simplifying the application process with artificial intelligence will lead to significant results for your institution. Welcome to the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, where each week we explore the impact of EdTech on the student experience with engaging, fun, and relevant conversations that honor the wide range of work happening all across the higher ed ecosystem. I'm your host, Dustin Ramsdell. I've been working in and around higher ed for the past decade, focused on student support and digital experiences. Join me every week for discussions with some of the best minds in education technology. The Higher Ed Geek Podcast is a part of the Enrollify Podcast Network, a robust collection of shows designed to help higher education professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal favorites linked in the show notes below. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com. So this episode will be an exciting one, I know, for me, because it's another great opportunity for me to just learn about an entirely new organization to me that is doing some amazing work in the higher ed space. So I will leave it to our guests to explain more about their background and their organization, College Possible's work. I don't want to, put my words in your mouth or anything like that. So if you want to introduce yourself, Siva, a brief overview of your background, and tell us a little bit more about College Possible's work.
Okay, thank you, Dustin. So I came to College Possible about 2 years ago. In fact, next week will be my 2-year anniversary. And I came to it because it is doing interesting work, but I'll tell you what led me here. Prior to coming to College Possible, I was the Director General of the International Baccalaureate. So a lot of interaction with higher ed and all of that. And prior to that, I was an Associate Provost at Rice University for K-12 affairs. So I've been always in the field of K-12 and higher ed. What attracted me to College Possible when a friend told me about it is that it really assists young people that come from low-income backgrounds and first-generation students to get into college. And that appealed to me quite a lot. The other thing about College Possible is it's been around for 25 years and thought of, first-gen students and all of that 25 years ago when it wasn't, this kind of, the notion of these students wasn't, common language and commonly talked about way back then. The other thing that attracted to me, because I was working, in my previous roles with students who were high-performing students, whether they came to Rice or whether they were IB students, the College Possible focuses on the academic middle, so grade 2.5 GPA onwards in high schools, where we start our programs. So we start our programs in junior high school and go all the way to assist the student as long as they remain with us to finish college. And I thought that long journey with the student, continuous journey with the student to enable them to complete their college journey was really, for me, quite challenging work that the organization has taken on and is successfully doing. So that's another feature that really attracted me to College Possible. So just to give you the what we do, we work with hundreds of universities and many, many high schools in 8 locations around the nation. And we start in junior high. The program starts in junior high school and works through the senior high school to get the student into college. And I'll talk a little bit about what we mean by that. And then we help them in the summer. And as you probably know, there's a huge numbers of students that drop out in that summer before, even if they got admitted to college, some of them may make other life choices in that summer. So we stay with them through the summer as well. And then we work with them 4 to 6 years or 2 years if their end goal is associate degree in community college or whatever, and work all the way through their completion. So I think all of those features really of the program and the population that College Possible serves attracted me to College Possible.
What's really interesting to me when I was kind of researching what you all do is that, like, it is the idea that, like, individual, institutions or organizations are maybe doing a piece of what you do kind of comprehensively, where, there's going to be the guidance counselor in a high school. There's going to be, folks at an institution, working in admissions or kind of, enrollment management and things, trying to kind of help support students to transition in, or, in like orientation or whatever else. But the idea of doing this more longitudinally and everything was just really kind of compelling. So I think that is, a really important sort of perspective to provide, is that, like, having this persistent kind of support across, this big kind of life change, for the student and everything. It was just yeah, I mean, like that makes so much sense, because there's going to be like some of that like drop off and stuff of like, well, you graduated high school, like you can't really, take advantage of the resources here anymore. And like, depending on which institution you might be interested, like they're just going to be, more or less able or willing or whatever to support prospective students and that sort of thing. So I guess, like, if you just want to talk more about some of those like different pieces, because I know like those are two big parts of it. Then there's obviously also the kind of student success and kind of retention piece of it as well. But that idea of like, you're building a very long-term, deep relationship with these individuals and everything, like, how is that, kind of deeper relationship piece of it such a important kind of, ingredient into just your all's approach in helping these students be successful?
Yeah, I mean, I think what is very important to note is, for the set of students that we're working with, we have to take a lot of, human touch kind of activities to ensure that the students understand that college is an option and the various processes that need to happen. So there's the angle of, working with, we work with specific high schools in each of the sites that we're in. So there's a lot of local partnership as well to work with the high schools and be there year after year. So it's a commitment both to the high school and to the students. And I think we need to really, we spend a lot of time working with the students to give that personal attention. We accomplish this right now by working with AmeriCorps volunteers. We've done that for a number of years. And but we're also very focused on, okay, given these students' academic achievement, we encourage them to go to universities that are best fit. Often we find that students just take whatever university or other options based on what everyone else is doing. And what we convince them is, based on your particular GPA and interests, let's figure out together what are 5 good universities you can apply to. A couple of them are reach. One is the target university, 2 are target university, and one is, kind of aspirational, right? That is very important, because that best fit is what we're looking for. It takes a lot of work to convince students to look at that. The second thing is we educate them about the graduation rate of the university for, say, Pell-type students, right? Because we're not actually teaching the student once they enter university. So we also try to direct them to say, these particular universities do very well with students like you. And here's the graduation rate, therefore you should think about it. Because you could attend, let's just say, a less costlier university, but then if their graduation rate is very low and, they don't have a lot of supports for the students academically, then that student is potentially spending money and, could fall into that huge category of students who get some credential but no graduation. So we do all of that hand-holding. And we spend a lot of time seeing what scholarships they can get and student aid, whether it's federal, the FAFSA, or whether it's other programs at that university, etc. So there's a lot of personal attention that these students, any student deserves. And we all know that in high schools, the counselor to student ratio is somewhere between 400 and 450 to one counselor. And that's just, as good as that counselor might be, I don't think they can provide the kind of service we do. So that's what we do on the college side to encourage that student to find that best fit college, believe they can be there, show them the ropes, and talk to them personally as well about their personal conditions, right? Because often, what might be seen as small impediments kind of stop the student. Like, do they have that registration fee if they need to do that? And, so we kind of remove the obstacles that are personal to them as well. And on the higher ed side, we do the same thing. We now are using full-time coaches because we have such a long touch point with the students. We've changed our model just recently to ensure that we're working with full-time coaches there. So, the coach can stay with the student a lot longer. We know the first year to second year persistent and second year to third year persistence are important goalposts. If the student accomplishes that in a university that graduates, these students, these kind of students, then they're on the path to graduation, etc. So we spend a lot of time there, and we stick with them to see. And more recently, we're also trying to focus our curriculum on preparing the students in the final years on getting a job and thinking about networking and all of those things that you need to do to get into a role once you complete college. And we work with many different, as I mentioned earlier, many different kinds of universities depending on where the student wants to go. And we also maintain relationships. I mean, with some universities, we send about 500 students, so we sit on the campus or reside on the campus and work with the students there. If there are other universities, we work with the students virtually and may go visit them occasionally. So we adjust our model according to the number of students we're serving at any given campus. But we work very closely with the university partners as well to let them know what needs to happen with these students and how we can support them. And sometimes that is educating the student about the resources that are already on campus, whether it's math tutoring or writing labs, etc. There too, it's very personalized service, getting to know the university, making sure the student is taking the right courses, and we don't do college advising, but making sure that the student is staying on track. And we talk to our alumni, or we do surveys of our alumni quite often. And, the alumni always refer to that longevity of that there's someone thinking of you for that long period of time. And the impact of the coach in the high school as well, to have that personalized service is what, many of the alumni speak about our program and remember College Possible fondly for that reason.
What I'm hearing a lot that is really kind of profound for me is just like, and we've talked about it not often enough, I think, on the show, of like that necessity and the importance and sort of the power of like bridging the information gaps of like that idea of, helping students really intentionally evaluate their options of where to apply, really try to dissuade them of any kind of misguided notions about, certainly just even on its face, like at the forefront of like, that college is for you. Like, you just got to find the right one. There's a lot of different institutions that offer a lot of different programs and different modalities and, big, small, rural, urban, whatever it is. And, help them navigate that, expanding on those capabilities and the capacity, those sorely needed areas for high schools and institutions and colleges and universities. So you were kind of elaborating on, like, there's obviously like all of those sort of micro pieces, I'll say, and then the macro piece of like you're working with a student long term and I presume like being very just like proactive with them, like checking in, giving a support, and just like even some of that, like there's like some of the tactical pieces, but even just the like, yeah, the person checking in, the person caring, the person motivating, sort of, following them along versus like often institutions will say it's like, well, we have all these things, but it's like it's very reactionary, and maybe there are just like limited sort of capacities or sort of responsiveness and whatever else, but like that you do know that there's somebody you can always reach out to and is with you, across a lot of different contexts, because it could be like sometimes even just different of like at one institution, if you change your major and from like the College of Business versus the College of Education, like, has vastly different offerings for, support resources or, whatever else. So I think that, yeah, it's just such an interesting thing to try to remove as many of those variables as possible, bring a lot of expertise from like working across a lot of, different students and different institutional contexts and whatever else. Like, you just kind of keep getting compounding results, I'm sure, of being able to better support students because you're seeing more students do it more different ways and more different places and all that kind of stuff. So it's just really, yeah, really, really incredible stuff. And I think I'm curious just because, you'd mentioned College Possible have been doing this work for a while. Just from your perspective and your learning, even just being there for the short time, if you know some of maybe just kind of the history and everything, like, has there been ways that, the nature of your organization's work has changed over the years? So I'm just imagining, obviously, everybody kind of went through the whole kind of roller coaster of the pandemic and just, even just prior to that and since then, how online learning has kind of reshaped how students are navigating where they're studying, what they're studying, how they're studying, and all that. But so like, that's what I'm thinking of, just any sort of, I'm just curious, I guess, just how the nature of your organization's work has changed over the years, as much as you're aware.
Yeah, I think in many ways, the organization started as Admissions Possible. So it was only working in the high school level and sending the student off to college. And then, after a few years of that work, then they realized that, okay, we're just sending them off to college, but, some they may or may not be graduating. So then it became College Possible to include both, the high school side and the college side. And also the organization has grown from being, in one place in Minnesota to, it started in Minnesota and then now into 8 sites. So it's learned a lot about how to kind of think about accumulating knowledge, as you said earlier. How do we gather the knowledge centrally so that we are learning from all of these instances of doing this work and working with all these universities. So that has changed a lot because we matured as an organization to gather that knowledge. And I'll tell you why that's important, because, when it comes to AI, having all of that knowledge in one place and written up is very useful for us as a knowledge resource. The pandemic had a big impact, when the whole, like everyone else, the organization learned how to go virtual with the coaching and all of that kind of stuff, and learned lessons there as well, which is in our back pocket if we need to pull that out. But we also have different modalities within these different cities the 8 cities that we operate in, and the number of schools that we operate in, where we've learned how to do virtual coaching as well. So we now have a program modalities of being on site, right, which is site-based programming. But we also have kind of hybrid versions, all across the nation as well, where we're spending some time on the campus, but we are also delivering services remotely, both at the high school level and the college level, to increase our capacity, And we're contemplating rural, so we'll be thinking of that kind of programming more to adjust to the rural needs. Obviously, we can't, place people in all of the rural places that we're thinking about. And we've done, studied the virtual coaching versus the non-virtual coaching, and we've done RCTs and stuff like that. So we know that we are doing that well as well. So I think in that sense, the work of the organization has kind of tested out a lot of models of operation and working but always keeping in mind that we need to help that student, right? It also, I think, at this point, gives the organization a lot of data with which to kind of maybe in the future infuse data science into the systems that we're creating to see how we can better support these students, right? Like, can we think through what is the best, path some of the other students in the past have taken from, say, X high school in Omaha to X high college destination in Nebraska or further, and how did those students kind of make it through. So I think in all of those ways, the organization has kind of grown from strength to strength and tested out all of these modalities. We are in some cases working with the systems as well, because we are working with all of the universities. We work with the higher education bodies and some of the places, etc. So we're able to contribute a lot to the knowledge about how to help and work in this space and contribute in this space.
Yeah, it's really great. I mean, just seeing, that your work is kind of expanded and kind of evolved. And 'cause I think just obviously like there's the core component and a lot of value in like the site-based, the in-person and all that, but just like the acknowledgement that whether it's just for like flexibility and convenience or just to sort of see, I guess, on one hand, like where things are going, like, there's a lot of students who are pursuing, fully online or hybrid learning, any number of institutions, but it could just be like, the next growth area is just sort of like, offering in addition to not replacing, anything that you're currently doing, just like the acknowledgement of like refining the approach, making sure that you're doing it in the best way possible. But like, from my background, I was a coach remotely, with like one particular program, but like students from all over the country. And it's that idea of like, it is just a different, sort of environment to work in and how you can be best of support and, still feel really connected to the institution and everything and, try to facilitate that connection. So I think the other part, because I think just making, mention of the different components that sort of comprise your work, the site-based, the AmeriCorps being kind of like a ingredient in that, and that sort of like longitudinal piece. The other piece that I just really want to kind of elaborate on, because I think, making that mention of like, you kind of have these 5 institutions, say, for each student, if they're like applying to higher ed, kind of being like, these ones maybe are the reach, these ones are more the target ones, whatever. But even that idea of being very agnostic, even though you are trying to make sure that you're expanding sort of their horizons and what they're sort of considering, I want to kind of zero in on just for a quick moment, I guess, on that idea of like, again, it might be that like there's on, other versions of this, individuals that kind of have that bias towards like, well, we really want you to study here. So obviously we're going to be really supportive and guiding you through and getting through our process or whatever. But like that idea that like, obviously at the end of the day, you want them to go to the place that's going to be the best fit for them, the best price, the best, experience and, whatever else. So like, can you talk more about that approach of like that at the end of the day, you almost care less about where they go, just that they go and that they're successful while they're there. So that obviously that's what sort of is like the North Star that's guiding the way that you're sort of advising the student.
Yeah, that's true. I think our focus is always on what does the student want to accomplish, and then guiding them to the best pathways for them to take. But ultimately, we don't recommend a particular university. As we said, we recommend that they have 5 universities in their sites or community colleges. So I think for us, really, it is just ensuring that the student is given the confidence to think and about all of these options, to be aware of them. And most of the time we find they're not aware. I just spent this last week sitting in some focus groups with students and them saying, look, as a first-gen student, my parents can't talk to me about this, so I really appreciated the help of knowing that I have all of these options. So we kind of really help the student find the right institutions that's a fit for them. Obviously, as I said earlier, we guide them into making sure that they're not going to end up in a place where they're not going to graduate, right? So we advise them on those things. What we're finding, interesting trend we're finding is that students are thinking a lot more about community college and getting, some sort of credential there that puts them in the job market. And these days, the credentials are not what we used to think of community colleges a long time ago, right? So sometimes they want to take that approach and finish a credential, and then, they either transfer to a bachelor's, which we recommend. I mean, all research continually still indicates that college is the best option for generational wealth change and lifetime earnings. And very recent studies also confirm that. So our coaching model continually emphasizes, the need to get a full degree from an institution. So we direct them there as well to say, here is how the gear shift that happens between community colleges and bachelors is really puzzling to me. I mean, I don't know why institutions don't do a better job of articulating what is, you get these courses in this community college and you go to, there isn't a schema for that, so we help them with that gear shift too, to get back into a bachelor's program. So for us, I think it's a really good scenario where we work with all of these universities continually, so we know what the resources are that the students can avail themselves of. And essentially, we guide them, almost like giving them an introduction to how to succeed in college, right? And help them understand the various resources they have. Sometimes we connect the students to other students that have gone through our program, so they have a network there. And, just being there for them to have someone that they can talk to about whatever their insecurities are, at the moment. So that helps a lot too. So essentially, that's it. We are a guide to the student and a coach, kind of someone they can call on when they need to get through whatever circumstances they're in at that point in time in their life. That's the value add, I think. It's not only a value add, it's a service that they wouldn't otherwise have.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of value add, and it's a lot that, again, like each student might need a different extent, like you're saying, there's a different sort of flavor. They might want to hear from a peer versus a professional versus, whatever else. And then, yeah, they might have like, a very clear idea of what they want. So you help them achieve that. They might need to learn and understand better of like, what's out there to kind of make that decision. And then to sort of segue to my next question, I think that aspect of like, you're seeing a lot more students pursue community college education to get some sort of credential and to have that, something to get out into the workforce. And in my head, I'm like, yeah, that is so smart, because potentially you could like get a job that then will pay for the rest of your education to get, for a degree, and you've got some experience under your belt and everything. Like that's the ideal scenario. So any trends that you're sort of seeing now you feel like are worth mentioning, or things that you're kind of keeping an eye on the horizon for?
Yeah, I think trends is this, we are going to watch this community college space a lot more, because, at a number of our sites, there are huge scholarship incentives for students to go to community college for free almost, so I think it'll be really interesting to kind of see community college graduation rate. We know is a problem, right? So we want to, make sure that we are helping the student make the right decisions there. But the other is McKinsey study has a while ago come out to say, students of a generation ago would have to have 7 different jobs in their lifetime. So there isn't like one job that people go through and stay in. So in that sense, I think it'll be interesting for us to see what students want to choose in the community college. Like you said, they can some of them can make a great salary after with some of the credentials. Maybe take time off, or maybe, finance their education that way so that they're not burdened by student debt would be all real interesting trends. I think the other trend that we're actually actively participating in is the use of AI. So we have created an AI-enabled coaching model now that is helping us kind of work with students a lot. And I think it'll be interesting as that becomes part of the culture, the AI becomes part of our productivity and our everyday use. How is that going to change, teaching and learning in colleges, right? Just like the internet did way back, in the 2000 era, the dramatic changes that it gave higher ed universities. So I think those are 2 things we're going to watch. We're very excited about how we're piloting AI. It's helped our coaches increase their productivity from like answering a question in 45 minutes to answering it in about 5 minutes now. So because they're querying our knowledge base. But what we've done differently now is to also give all of that knowledge that used to come out of the coach's mouth essentially before, right? Like we would train the coaches. The coaches would then deliver the information. We're opening up the portal to students as well directly, so they can query the AI directly. And again, I was in that focus group and we were asking them how they like it, and they like it a lot. So students are now used a lot to avatars and all of that, and they're constantly in touch with digital media. So I think that'll be an interesting to see how universities, which traditionally take a bit of time to adopt to new things, right? How they'll adopt, but this is the way we're adapting to that trend and using it in very positive ways, not all of the negatives that we hear about the AI, but training training on our own content and our own expertise. And we just see that escalating and in a way to be extremely helpful to our students to give personalized responses and also the routine nudges, which we're all used to, right? We get notifications on our phone or a text from someone. So automating a lot of that information disbursement, as it were, but then keep the human touch, right? That's the thing we want to retain in this trend, to ensure that that human connection still remains strong with our students when everything is going quite digital these days.
Yeah, I appreciate you mentioning AI. It's always nice to kind of bring that into the conversation to acknowledge how that's, just influencing all of our work and everything, and that the sort of efficiency, productivity gains, and, the ability to be more responsive and, have more kind of just, comprehensive support for students, where I think, in so many ways, it is just a, it's an augmentation of like existing sort of like, chatbot functionality and everything, that it can really be more, robust with what kind of information it's pulling from. But the idea that it can really supplement in a meaningful way, the human work of, coaches, advisors, faculty members, whoever else, like it could just be this thing that is similar to kind of just what I was mentioning before, like the idea of just like, we got to bridge these gaps. Like there's just sort of these like chasms that exist. And, sometimes it is just the idea of like, oh, it's just like how it is. You got to wait for somebody to get back to you, whatever. But if it's like, especially if it's just that sort of like frequently asked question or whatever, like that's already what we're kind of trying to build towards with chatbots as they were. But now it's like we're doing it in, that much more of a dynamic way with AI, and just, making sure that nobody has to go, too long without getting an answer to a question of what they need to be, just going on this whole sort of student life cycle journey, and a, supportive way. But I think, I'll give you the last word here. I think with everything you mentioned of, just the importance of, the human-to-human interaction, the work on your sites, virtual, elements coming in, AI, all this good stuff, everything that's happening now. But like, what's the advice that you have for other higher ed leaders right now, especially just when it comes to this sort of longitudinal work across the student life cycle to make sure, all students get access to higher ed and are successful? Advice that you'd have for your higher ed leader colleagues right now?
Yeah, I think that the advice is really to create support structures for these students, right? When they enter college, so that they can see the end, right? As the number of, these young people that are entering, who are eligible for Pell Grants and all of that, I think it is important for us to kind of keep that focus on how do we enable these students to complete their college education in a reasonable amount of time with a reasonable amount of cost, so they can get out into the workforce, change their lives, change their families' lives. I think, the colleges, could pay a lot more attention in this area and see how they can create those structures themselves. I mean, we are augmenting those structures, but it'll be really helpful for these students to understand, better what is the pathway to course completion and to successful completion of things there. And also, I think colleges traditionally don't see their role as getting into the how do we get the student into a job, which is fair enough. I don't think they should get into job placement and all of that stuff. But also educating the student about internships, and some places do this really well, right? Like that pathway out of college into the world of work. They could intensify their efforts there so that students have a lot more opportunities and see themselves availing of opportunities as well. Because there's a difference between having an opportunity and, middle income and high income students who come from those families have the support of their families to kind of avail themselves of all of these things that might be available in the university. But how do universities intentionally ensure that students, from the kind of students we work with, also get access to those internships and placement services, etc., I think would be interesting. And the other thing is also, I think, more transparency on what the financial awards are, right? Like, because the student is making a big decision on that. And sometimes those financial awards contain a lot of information that doesn't really indicate that this is not income you can, like example, maybe work study is one thing. You could get a work study, you could not, but if you include that in the financial aid award, then the student is under the could misinterpret that as that's solid money. And those kind of things as well. And also the path of least resistance of getting a degree, I guess, so that you're short a number of courses to get the degree and move on into real life would be something that's very important to the kind of students we work with. So what is the transparency around that? What a path to a particular degree in, say, communications, marketing, or health science, or whatever is, that'll help our student complete faster, I think, would be some of the advice I would give. We find some of the universities that we work with really do have a good set of resources, and we are helping the student along to take advantage of those resources. And we find some universities don't have those resources in place. So I think that's the advice would be like concerted thinking about these students as well, because universities do get good Pell Grants. They are getting finances from the Pell Grants, etc. And these students are quite valuable to us as a society as well, to come from the means that they do, and then to contribute to the society in quite meaningful ways in the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's good advice that you're giving, because I think some of that stuff is just so much what squarely in this sort of equation would live with the institution of like, what do your financial aid letters look like? Like how clear and transparent you being with that, and sort of like career outcome data and whatever for folks who do study in a particular major, just things to consider there. And then, just some of the pieces around, like, I think you'd mentioned it with like sort of the community college piece of the idea of like getting that 4-year degree still being so impactful and important. The institution would be the one, if they're going to be like really opening themselves up and creating sort of the memorandums of understanding and whatever else to like help with transfer processes and stuff. And that is a whole other topic that I do hope to get to this year over the season, is talking about transfer stuff, because it is a mess. But yeah, like that is all that stuff like would live squarely with the institution, even as much as you're sort of augmenting and supporting and all this other kind of stuff. Like they would need to be doing that work and just having the good mindset of valuing maintenance and the sort of continuous improvement versus like, because sometimes it is the idea of like, oh, the squeaky wheel, like, oh, maybe we'll kind of deal with that. It is kind of getting a little attention because it's like not working as it should. But then like institutions will just be reactive, and it's like, oh my gosh, the wheel is just completely fallen off. Now we need to try to fix our retention because it's too low, and we're, whatever. It's like, do that proper maintenance, like keep moving forward. Don't just wait until there is some sort of problem or issue, like if you're getting really like strapped for enrollments or, not getting retention, graduation rates or whatever else, like, if you see that like just going off like a deep end or this sort of precipitous drop, it's like, how you can avoid that is like just doing the good maintenance, investing in the resources and, doing that good work. So I think all of that being great advice, but just really appreciating the work that you and your team are doing, all that you shared. We'll have ways to connect with you and College Possible in the description for the episode here. So I encourage folks to go check out all of that. But just thanks again so much for your time, for hanging out for this episode. The Hired Geek Podcast is a part of the Enrollify Podcast Network. If you like this podcast, chances you'll like all the other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing constantly, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better hired professional. Our shows help you find your next big idea and feature a selection of the industry's best as your host. Learn from people like Jamie Hunt, Seth Odell, Day Kibbolds, and Eddie Francis, as well as so many other of your favorite leaders in higher education. Enrollify is made possible by the support of Element 451, a leading AI-powered, all-in-one student engagement platform helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.